I'd like to welcome to the stage Barbette Marzheuser-Wood, and she will introduce, from partner at Denton's, and she'll introduce her panel. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the introduction. So we're actually going to talk specifically about negotiating franchise agreements, and the idea is we have a franchisor, DineEquity, well-known US franchisor, representing the franchisor point of view, and then we have a very experienced and sophisticated franchisee, Daud from Gulf Gourmet, representing the point of view of the franchisee. And we're going to just run through some of the key issues that come up in negotiations. I also sit on both sides of the table, so I've worked with many well-known franchisors, and the debate always is, do we start with a reasonable agreement that's easy to sign for the franchisee, or do we start with something really tough and then we have lots of room for negotiations and to give? So let's maybe just ask with that question, so sorry to maybe put you on the spot there, Dan, but some US franchise agreements are perceived as extremely one-sided and unreasonable by local franchisees. What's your take on that?
That's a great question, and I think what's key, Babette, is that just to understand where we come from, we've been now franchising for nearly 60 years. We have 400 franchise partners around the world, representing more than 3,700 restaurants across 20 countries, representing more than $8 billion in sales. And this could not be a successful business if we didn't really think about the priorities of our franchise partners. And I think that if you manage by the agreement, then you're not really managing a partnership. I think the only way to manage any type of franchisor relationship in any industry for that matter is to first and foremost understand the perspective of the franchise partner, which in our case, it always starts with expectations, return expectations on the investment, and then figure out a way how we can not just meet but exceed the expectations that each one of our partners have around the world. And frankly, depending on who you deal with, those expectations are very, very different. And there has been a clear evolution of those expectations over the last couple of decades. But as it relates to US agreements, I can't speak for other companies. I think what is clear is that when you look at DineEquity with two leading brands, with Applebee's and IHOP, we have two brands that for the last 8 consecutive years have been number one in terms of both sales and market share in their respective categories. And so IP, the intellectual property, is really what we own and what we have to manage very, very carefully. So at the end of the day, the agreements are merely there to ensure that our IP is protected. And again, if you ask any one of my team members around the world, they will not refer to the agreement, but they will refer to the partnership. And those partners, with us, the 400 partners that we have, those that are most proactive in dealing with us and jointly collaborating on meeting those return expectations are the ones that are the most successful.
And I'm sure Sami will say he hears that a lot, but then he looks in the contract, and there it says, in our sole discretion, we can tell you to do A, B, C, and if you don't, you're in breach and we can terminate. So what do you think, Sami? Is that a good story?
Well, no, I mean, I think it's very, I've seen many different agreements, many different brands, and what Daniel says is also very true. There are a lot of brands, especially now, that are, with the world kind of being so small, I think even the American franchisors are starting to realize the importance of the word reasonable, right? Kind of as opposed to sole discretion. And I've actually seen this over the years from the time that I started in this business to today, there's actually there's a change where a lot of the American brands are becoming a lot more reasonable and understanding the need for it being a partnership and not a dictatorship, right?
I think partnership is the word, isn't it? Between a good franchisor and a franchisee, it is more of a collaborative relationship. But one of the challenges from the franchisor's point of view is that for all the franchisees, there has to be a certain level of equal treatment. So that I guess there can't be any favorites, and they can't have a bad franchisee bringing everyone else down. So maybe just picking up on Dan's point regarding the non-negotiables and the negotiables. I mean, what would you say are the non-negotiables for you, and what are the areas where you're happy to be flexible?
Yeah, I think anything as it relates to operating by brand standards is a non-negotiable for us. And I think great franchise partners, and I feel incredibly proud of the partners that we've selected around the world, which, by the way, is probably one of the most important objectives in this whole franchisee-franchisor relationship, which is it starts, and the responsibility lies with each one of the franchisors, it starts with selecting the right franchise partner that understands that you're going into business for yourself, but not by yourself. And so the reason why you are working with brands is exactly because you want to leverage the best practices and the strength of the brand rather than having to recreate something or starting from scratch and building up your own IP. So what is not negotiable is managing to the operating standards, and we clearly have the proper support in place to help you achieve those operating standards, whether it's audits, whether it's our teams, regions, centers of excellence around the world that provide you direct support. What is negotiable, and what I think is very important, is growth. And growth, for instance, and I think this is some of the things that we've seen in our past, is you can sign a piece of paper that says, I'm going to open up 50 restaurants in the next 5 years. And that might be all reality, or that might be complete wishful thinking. The key here is to, first of all, find out what the market potential is, the clear market potential. Second of all, find out whether the capability of the franchise partner is able to deliver at that level. And then thirdly, build out a plan that allows for flexibility so that there is no penalty when it comes to not meeting some of these hurdles. But the responsibility there goes back to a dialogue between the partners to say what is realistic. And it is us on the franchisor side pushing back in a healthy way on what is feasible and what is not feasible.
Yeah, I think that's two very excellent points that are coming out of that. So maybe let's hear Sami's point of view on, obviously, brand standards, system standards must be followed to the dot. Is there room for some localization?
I think when it comes to, sure, local customs, I think there's a bit of gray in that, and that's where you can maybe, I would say, fine-tune the operations, but I 100% agree. You're going out and you're getting a franchise. You're getting a franchise because you like the food, you like the design of the restaurants. So when you bring it back home, if you want to start now playing around with it and changing, whether it's the look or the food or the service model, or why take a franchise in the first place? And I was in a situation 6 years ago with a brand I didn't really like that much, but I really liked the guys behind it. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do this, but I want to change 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And somebody said to me, he said, so why take the franchise? And I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. So we take, you know, we take brands and we always try to be as close to kind of, you know, the home base as possible. We don't do much localizing in our company.
So I think that's an important takeaway maybe for the franchisees in the room. One sees that sometimes with inexperienced franchisees or when they don't have specialist advisors, that things are deleted like the manual. You must follow the manual and we can upgrade the manual and if we do that you follow. They delete that. We don't know. We need to see the manual. We need to study it before we can sign that. This is just essential to franchising, and it would be the wrong battle to pick. Also, it was very good to hear that there's openness around the development targets, because that's obviously a very important topic. And there's a study by Cornell University which says that 80% of all development schedules are overly ambitious and never accomplished. So people might say, we're going to do 100 units in 10 years, and they'll only do 50. Is that a reason to terminate them? Probably not, because they have maybe delivered what the true market potential was. So it's an important point for negotiation. I mean, what view do you normally take on these schedules?
We actually are always very conservative. I do not like to, you know, overpromise and say, yes, we will build 1,000 of these in 2 days, and then we build one, right? So I would rather come to an agreement where we know we'll overshoot it, but if the economy is having a tough time or whatever it may be, you know, basically I never want a gun to my head that I have to open, because when you have a gun to your head, then you start making mistakes and you start opening in locations that you shouldn't be opening. So all my agreements across all of our brands are very, when it comes to opening schedules, are very reasonable.
And what would you say, question to both of you, in terms of failure to meet the schedule? So let's say we've gone with Sami's approach, so it is a conservative schedule, it's a true minimum. It's not what your business plan says you could do if you've done really well, which might be 50, it's just 10 over 5 years. So you don't even have 10. What should the consequences be?
From my side, look, I think it comes down to intentions. If we've not opened because we've neglected the brand, because we've focused elsewhere, because we don't have the money to do it, or what have you, I think there's certain remedies for that and certain action a franchisor must take. But I think if you're in a situation where you thought the market was a 30-store market and it turns out that it's a 10-store market, then I think it becomes, in that case, I don't think a franchisor should take it away from you. And I think if you're working as a partnership and together, then it's not, you know, 10 units down the line that you go and tell the franchisor, oh, by the way, we can't open anymore. It's an ongoing dialogue, so you know, he knows where the market is, and you show them that, look, this is what the market can handle.
And I'm sure, you know, if they didn't think that another partner could open more, they would be unlikely to terminate. But in terms of when it comes to the contract, what you usually see is the right to take away exclusivity or the right to terminate, or sometimes you see sort of liquidated damages clauses saying you can pay a shortfall fee and continue. So some of these points, you know, I see coming up and cause quite a lot of discussion in the negotiation. Another possibility maybe is to say, okay, if you're just 1 unit short, maybe that is no reason for a drastic penalty like that, but maybe look over a longer period and give a reasonable cure opportunity. What sort of things have you seen for some of your brands on that?
Well, I think, as I think of this relationship, it's usually a relationship of 20 years. And so when you think of an agreement, first and foremost, if you're managing to the letter of an agreement, that's almost as if you were to manage your marriage by the letter of the prenup. If you do that, then that's going to have a consequence as it relates to the health of your marriage. And I think it goes back to, and Sami said it very eloquently, it's an ongoing dialogue that has more to do with the market dynamics and less to do with exactly every single letter or word that is spelled out in the contract, because the contract is meant to be as conservative as possible. I don't know any lawyer around the world that has a optimistic view in that everything will happen brilliantly without anything being tied down.
That's not our job.
Exactly. So I think that my favorite lawyers are those that help us bridge the gap between protecting what needs to be protected in an agreement and those that understand that the only way that we can move this forward is find a healthy balance between what is realistic to achieve in the marketplace and what we're trying to achieve. And ultimately, again, it's a minimum of a 20-year term as we think about, or the lifetime of our restaurants. So that's a long time where it is going to be cyclical. If you look at the last 7 years, and you look at the cycles that we've gone through across the world, there's been some very significant impacts. And if we didn't, if we weren't human to begin with to think about, well, these cycles have inhibited us to properly develop or properly deliver against some of the expectations, that would be inhumane, and therefore that would make us a terrible marriage partner.
And I guess it can damage the relationship before it's even started.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
if you have really rough negotiations, start walking out of the rooms on each other, people lose their temper, sometimes that can be quite unfixable.
Yeah, and I went through something year before last where I negotiated with a brand, but it was a very tough, bruising negotiation, and I just didn't like. And the reason for that is because they're an American brand, without naming names, but they were just, you know, they basically thought, you know, I had an oil well in my backyard, and so they're just gonna take all this oil away. And so we negotiated for maybe 9 months, and in the end I just walked away. When the deal was finally done, ready to sign, I walked away, and they were obviously in shock. And I said, you know, this is a marriage, and we're starting off where during our kind of courting phase, it was horrible. So what are we doing getting married, right? And so that's very important, that there's, it's got to be fair at the end of the day to both parties. You know, it's not about let me win every battle, or the franchisor should win every battle. It's more about, you know, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. You want to see the spirit of partnership during that courting phase. It's fair to take some tough decisions, and there are some, you know, ill-advised parties on both sides out there, but it's an important point. Let's move to another important topic in a franchise negotiation. The franchisee often builds the business with a view to selling it after a certain period of time. The franchisor will say, no, I've chosen you because, you know, you're Gourmet Golf, you're an experienced guy. I want you as my partner and not somebody that you're going to sell to. So how do you resolve the difficulty that the franchisor will want to restrict the ability of the franchisee to sell? Do you let your franchisees sell?
It really is a case-by-case basis, Babette, because in the end, you're absolutely right. We spent an extraordinary amount of time in finding and then choosing the right partner, because we know that 80+% of the success of the brand in every single market is going to be reliant on choosing that right partner. So once we found that partner and we've signed a long-term agreement, for us to walk away from that partner is tough. We understand that obviously we're both in a business and there are going to be opportunities, but we obviously hold the rights for that sale to happen. We currently are in a process in Brazil, for instance, where one of our partners has received the majority investment, and the ownership is changing hands to a group that has greater capacity and at the same time is going to leverage the existing infrastructure that was built by the partner. So that's a win-win situation for both our existing partner, the new entity, and ourselves, and in that case we are in favor of those. So I would say in every single one of the situations that we have around the world where some sale of ownership or transfer of ownership occurs, we review that and we do reserve the right to deny it for the sole purpose of protecting the IP for the remainder of the partners that we have around the world.
So that's probably a worry for the franchisee, because they will say, what if you don't like the guy? You know, you take a look at him, you take a dislike, and you reserve that discretion. What certainty can you give me that you're going to be reasonable? I mean, what would you normally ask for, Sami?
Well, I mean, across all of our agreements, they're the same. We do have a right to sell, but we need to first get the approval of the franchisor. But such approval cannot be unreasonably withheld. So, you know, I mean, again, you know, we can be in a business where we're in it forever. We could be, but you never know. I mean, in my, since the time I founded Gourmet Golf, you know, over all these years, we sold 2 brands. For reasons, I mean, for actual good reason. And I think at the end of the day, if I want to sell a brand, my franchisor knows I'm no longer committed to it. Why would they want me as a partner in the first place for that brand? I mean, so as long as it's kind of course you seek approval, but there's got to be some kind of reasonableness in there.
I guess a good compromise is to try to agree a list of reasons that would be objectionable, such as for US companies, obviously they can't be on the naughty persons list, or criminals, that sort of thing, competitors, people who are already in litigation with the franchisor. I think those are all, you know, easily understood. The more difficult one is whether you want to have a more subjective requirement around operational experience, and that's, you know, probably you would want that, and Sami would say, well, you know, how are we going to judge that fairly?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's that, if that's kind of very black and white, then suddenly you're ruling out a lot of potential buyers, such as private equity or whatnot. So, I mean, as long as there's a solid management team, then that should suffice.
So maybe the takeaway for the audience is do look at those clauses carefully and try to find middle ground around a list of reasons for qualifying buyers. That's probably the well-trodden middle ground. See, we're sort of down to our last 5 minutes, so let's talk maybe about the money. The money is obviously important. So fees, not amount of fees, that's boring, but types of fees. So typically you would see a territory fee, you could see a unit opening fee, a royalty, and various chargebacks, particularly for territory visits. And if you're coming over from the US to Dubai twice a year with 10 people, that would be an expensive additional cost in addition to the fees. So what fees do you normally have? Do you have all those fees?
When you look at our agreement, we have a territory fee if it is a new territory that is being assigned. We have the royalty, the marketing fee, like you rightly said, that's quite boring. I think, again, this goes back to, I'm an investor myself, so I put myself in the shoes of our partner, and our team puts themselves in the shoes of our partner. And when it comes to expenditures, training is a good example. If you have a brand that doesn't have any infrastructure in the region, you're looking at sending your key operators for training to the US or wherever the brand may be, having a training team come over from the US, and that indeed, those amount of fees could really amount to a significant investment that needs to be amortized over the life of the investment. We have, we're actually one of the very few companies that has made a very deliberate decision in investing, and it's truly an investment, of having a team here based in Dubai for the region, because in that way we are providing support, and we can be self-sustaining for the region, recognizing the impact of local cultures, recognizing the need for local supply chain support and all of that. So all of those efforts are being provided as part of the agreement that we sign, and that help us alleviate some of the fees and expenses that you would expect and anticipate from some of the brands that are not as mature. And I think when you consider signing up with a partner, what I would recommend looking at is how serious are they about being in the region? Because every brand can sign an agreement and sign a napkin and say, I'm going to support you. But once that agreement is signed, what is there in for you? How many times are they going to be sitting face to face with you? Do they truly have a regional infrastructure with regional subject matter experts that can support you in a way that is relevant and meaningful for the business that you're building? And that, to me, is part of an essential success equation with the partners. If you have to rely on people that are thousands and thousands of miles away, you have to consider that. And that's not necessarily something that you may see in the agreement, but that's definitely going to hit you when you start adding up all of the fees, both in terms of setting up the business, setting up the market, and managing ongoing openings.
That's very interesting to hear. Now, Sami, I know you don't pay an initial fee, do you? You focus on the ongoing value of the relationship.
Well, so I tend to stay away from kind of territory fees. We do sometimes do kind of store opening fees. So you know, some companies call it a territory fee. Some people just call it a store opening fee. So every time you open a store, you pay a certain fee, and then obviously royalties, which is standard. With respect to the training teams and whether the audit teams, whether it's the franchisor executives visiting you, most of those costs are borne by the franchisor. And I think for me, what it comes down to is that also shows how committed they are. There was a franchisor I was talking to, and he said, you've got to pay for everything. Yeah. Everything. And, sure, we'll fly over once a year and whatnot, but you have to pay for everything. And I kind of just got the feeling it's a one-way street. It's got to be a two-way street. Sure, I'll pay your royalty. Sure, I'll pay your store opening fee, but you've got to spend that on me, right? Don't kind of take that and the whole amount goes to the bottom line. If you're spending a good chunk of that on me, at least I feel, okay, you guys are really committed. And I think to Daniel's point, it's very important that the franchise, it's tough to figure this out, but the mindset. Are they actually committed to going international or to going to your region? When I say committed, are they really going to support you, right? I mean, being 10,000 miles away, how much support are you going to get? But are they always going to come down here on their dime and kind of stand shoulder to shoulder with you? I think
And you're
that's the
right, a
difference.
decent franchisor will be at least throwing in a complimentary visit a year that they shouldn't be charging you for. That should be their relationship management effort. Now, so red signs come up, time's up for our session. There's lots more to talk about around exclusivity and territory, but maybe rather than do that, ask the audience, were there any specific points, tricky points in the negotiation that you wanted to ask our panel about? Yes, please.
Is that a question for both of us?
Go ahead.
So for us, there's three key regions around the world that we're emphasizing growth on. Latin America, and particularly Mexico. The Middle East, we have currently 62 restaurants. We have open between both Applebee's and IHOP across the GCC. And we have virtually every single one of our partners over the last 24 months has signed up for additional development that will get us to double in size here in the Middle East. And in Asia, for us, we just signed India as a big market for us going forward. And Southeast Asia will be next in terms of continuing to grow our portfolio, which currently is our presence is in the Philippines and Indonesia.
For us, well, I mean, look, it's going to continue being UAE, I mean, the kind of the big markets, UAE, Saudi. I mean, those are the two, let's call them, not to take anything away from the other markets, the A markets, meaning the two markets where I can get the most scale. And then we're obviously, Egypt is a very important market for us, or will be a very important market for us. Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, Bahrain, you know, the rest of the Gulf. We're also going to look at, obviously because of all the regional issues, you know, Lebanon and Syria are they're on hold, and Jordan we're also looking at. But again, I mean, these are maybe just down the line.
Okay, maybe one more question.
There's a guy there.
Sorry, this is also maybe a two-way question. Just, you know, finishing on the marketing fee that you talked about. So, you know, we do support a lot of franchisees, franchisor to localize or to do marketing on both ends. But there's a small problem when it comes to the franchisor, you know, bearing the marketing fee. As you say, you expect them to also use their own, you know, the retainer, the royalties they're taking to spend a big chunk of it on the franchisee. But most of the cases, the franchisee is starting up with 1 or 2 stores, and the royalties are ridiculously small, you know, to have enough support from those royalties on the marketing. And the competition is getting high to really launch a new brand in the country, so you need to invest on, you know, marketing, media, PR, etc. So how do you see this compensated from both ends, as a franchisee and as a franchisor?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when I said the franchisor, I'd like the franchisor to spend that money on me. I did not mean marketing. In fact, the franchisor, none of my franchisors do any marketing for me. But it's more coming to visit, sending people to support us, just kind of being there for us, as opposed to kind of, you know, counting every penny. And I'll tell you something. Well, two points I want to make. Number one, when it comes to a franchisor, when, you know, for a franchisor to start making money from the franchise department, that's when they've been able to get scale. When you got 1 or 2 or 5 or 10, doing it the right way, I don't believe a franchisor can make money, right? When they've got scale, sure, then they're really making a lot of money. And then I think on the marketing front, you as a franchisee have to overspend. Whether the industry average is 2% or 2.5% or 3%, I think initially it's got to be much higher, right? Because you've got 1 or 2 units, and you know, it depends what your sales are, but let's just say it's nothing substantial. So you're going to have to overspend on that.
You mentioned that most of your franchisors are not helping you with marketing. Perhaps we can help you with that. Because I think it is critical and essential that the brand helps each one of the franchise partners that we have around the world with marketing. And we do that in 2 ways. One, and I know we're over time, but one is instead of holding the marketing fees with us, the large majority, 3 points out of 4, are held in the market so that they can be spent in the right, proper way. And then the remainder of the fee goes into a fund that we put in place for the region to do joint efforts. And so we have a marketing team here based in Dubai that oversees all of our GCC efforts. We have social digital agencies that help us and media agencies that help us across the entire region to collaborate and create cross synergies. Because at the end of the day, unless you have a significant footprint, which most brands are still growing in this region, are not going to have. Even the big brands are not really to the point of full saturation yet, just like we see in other markets like the US. The best way to get the greatest return on your investment is to look for synergies and to have the brand help you with defining the marketing strategy, and then help through the network of agencies execute a marketing plan that goes across the regions.
I have to say that's a very enlightened approach to take. I'm really quite impressed, because a lot of times you get the discussion, let's say the marketing fee is 2%, franchisee says, please commit 1% to my region and 1% to global. The answer tends to be no. But on this note, I think we have to finish. Please feel free to ask more questions of the panelists during the break. It's been a great panel. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with the audience.